The dust swirled in choking waves across the ridgeline, carried by the razor-sharp winds of Vexus 9. Master Sergeant Cole, Eagle Eye Carter adjusted his scope, his rifle steady against the rocky perch. The planet was a wasteland of jagged cliffs and sulfuric air, a battlefield chosen by the Zeldar Dominion for its brutal, inhospitable nature. They thought humans would falter here, that their primitive biology couldn't endure. They were wrong. Through his high-powered optics, Carter watched the alien encampment below. Hundreds of Zeldar troops moved with rigid precision, their exoskeletal armor glinting under the weak light of Vexus 9's twin moons. Unlike humans, they didn't crawl through the mud or hide behind cover. They didn't need to. Their technology had given them centuries of superiority, allowing them to scoff at anything resembling traditional warfare. To them, human ballistics were relics of a bygone era, laughable against their energy-based defenses. Carter pulled back slightly, resting his cheek against the rifle's stock. Beside him, Sergeant Blake Mitchell adjusted his spotting scope, whispering numbers. Wind speed, barometric pressure, elevation, all second nature to men like them. They weren't soldiers playing war. They were specialists, the kind who could make the impossible look effortless. Mitchell smirked, his voice barely audible over the comms. They have no idea what's coming. Carter exhaled slowly, settling his crosshairs over a Zeldar officer standing on a command platform. The alien was barking orders, its mandibles clicking with arrogance, probably issuing another speech about human inferiority. Carter had heard enough of those. He adjusted for wind, his heartbeat steady, and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the ridge, lost to the wind before the Zeldar officer's head snapped back in a burst of violet mist. Chaos erupted below. Soldiers scrambled for cover, their formation shattering. Carter cycled the bolt, chambering another round before the first body hit the ground. Mitchell chuckled, watching through his scope. They're panicking. The Zeldar weren't accustomed to this kind of warfare. Their battles were fought with orbital strikes and towering war machines, not invisible specters, picking them apart from beyond their own effective range. They relied on their energy barriers, but those shields meant nothing against a tungsten-tipped round moving at supersonic speeds. Carter adjusted, found another target, and fired. A second Zeldar dropped. "Time to move," Mitchell said, already packing up. "They'll send drones." Carter nodded, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. They weren't here for a prolonged engagement. This was about psychological warfare as much as it was about thinning enemy numbers. Let the Zeldar commanders believe they were being hunted by something they couldn't see, couldn't predict. Fear was a weapon, and humans had learned to wield it well. They slid down the ridge, moving through a series of jagged outcroppings toward a new vantage point. Every step was calculated, their movements honed by years of training. The Zeldar had numbers, had machines and technology beyond human reach. But Carter and his men had patience, discipline, and the willingness to play the long game. As they reached their next position, the distant hum of an approaching patrol vibrated through the rocks. Zeldar seekers, bipedal machines with infrared scanners, designed to flush out hidden threats. They weren't infallible, but they were effective against undisciplined forces. Carter and Mitchell melted into the terrain, bodies pressed against the rock. Through his scope, Carter tracked the lead machine, a sleek, insect-like construct with multiple scanning appendages. The Zeldar still believed they were dealing with conventional snipers. They had yet to understand that Carter wasn't just another soldier with a rifle. He was an apex predator, and this was his hunting ground. The machine came closer, its scanners sweeping the area in rhythmic bursts. Carter adjusted his aim, letting the Zeldar believe they had control for just a few seconds longer. Then, with surgical precision, he placed a single round through the machine's optical core. Sparks erupted as it collapsed, twitching in the dirt. Mitchell didn't waste a second, shifting to eliminate the nearest Zeldar soldier reacting to the downed machine. 2 more shots, 2 more bodies. The remaining forces hesitated. That was all the opening Carter needed. Another shot rang out, another officer dead before he could process what was happening. The surviving Zeldar pulled back, retreating toward the main base. Carter watched them go, allowing fear to spread through their ranks. This wasn't about numbers. It was about control. "Command's gonna love this," Mitchell muttered. Carter pulled back from his scope, watching the Zeldar scramble. "Let them run. They'll tell their commanders, and then we'll do it again." They vanished into the rocks, leaving only corpses and spent casings behind. The Zeldar changed their tactics overnight. The arrogance of the first engagement was gone, replaced with cold calculation. No longer did officers stand in the open, barking orders with the confidence of untouchable superiority. Instead, command centers were relocated underground, shielded by layers of energy fields and thick alloy plating. Patrols moved in unpredictable patterns, supported by aerial drones that swept every ridge and valley with thermal imaging. The Dominion had underestimated human marksmanship once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Cole Carter and his team adapted just as quickly. They had to. The battlefield was no longer a sniper's playground, but a war zone thick with countermeasures, designed specifically to eliminate them. Carter watched through his scope as the Zeldar deployed new measures: disruptor nodes that distorted kinetic trajectories, sensor grids that mapped even the smallest disturbances in airflow. Every move was calculated to neutralize ballistic threats before they could manifest. The aliens weren't retreating. They were evolving. "Smart bastards," Blake Mitchell muttered, adjusting his spotting scope. "They learned fast." Carter didn't respond. He tracked a Zeldar officer moving between barricades, the creature's armored exoskeleton blending with the environment. The shot was there, but the moment he adjusted for wind, a disruptor pulse shimmered through the air, skewing the projected bullet path. It wasn't a shield. It was worse. The technology bent atmospheric density itself, throwing off human calculations that relied on physics and consistency. Carter exhaled, lowering his rifle. "We're not getting clean shots anymore." Mitchell scowled. "So what now?" "We changed the game." They relocated before the next drone sweep, moving through the canyons toward an abandoned relay station. Inside, Gunnery Sergeant Travis, Deadshot, Reed was already waiting, his gear spread across a metal crate. Reed was a different breed, older, built like he'd spent half his life dragging bodies across war zones. He believed in 2 things: precision and problem-solving. "Figured they'd wise up," Reed said, tossing a round between his fingers. "Tech like that, they think they got us figured out. They don't." Mitchell dropped into a crouch, pulling up the recon tablet. "They've got kinetic dampeners everywhere. We can't just shoot through it." Reed grinned. "Then we don't shoot through it. We shoot around it." Carter studied the map, his mind working through possibilities. The Zeldar relied on mathematical precision. If they controlled ballistics, they assumed human weapons were neutralized. But human snipers weren't just machines following program calculations. They were artists. The solution wasn't brute force. It was deception. Reed reached into his pack, pulling out a modified .50 caliber round. Tungsten carbide, subsonic velocity, irregular spin profile. Won't trigger the same dampening response because it's not behaving like a standard shot. Mitchell arched a brow. "A slow round. You realize how much compensation that takes." Carter picked it up, rolling it between his fingers. "A lot, but it won't trip their countermeasures." Reed nodded. "Exactly. We're not fighting physics anymore. We're fighting expectations." The first test came hours later. The Zeldar had regrouped in a forward operating base, layering their defenses with motion sensors and aerial spotters. Carter took position, adjusting his rifle with a scope recalibrated for subsonic munitions. Through the lens, he watched a Zeldar commander standing beside a data terminal, issuing orders with the same certainty his predecessor had displayed days earlier. The Dominion believed it had solved the human problem. It hadn't. Carter adjusted his aim, compensating for the slower round. The shot left the barrel with barely a whisper, traveling in a delayed arc. The disruptor nodes didn't react. The kinetic dampeners, programmed to detect high-velocity rounds, didn't register the bullet as a threat. The Zeldar officer was still mid-sentence when his head snapped to the side, purple blood spraying across the console. Panic followed, but something deeper stirred beneath it. Confusion. The countermeasures hadn't stopped the shot. The Zeldar scrambled to find an explanation, their systems scanning for anomalies. Carter chambered another round, taking out a second officer before they even realized what had happened. Mitchell grinned. They have no idea how he did that. Reed chuckled. Good. Let them chase ghosts. The Zeldar reacted predictably, deploying even more advanced tracking systems, but the damage had already been done. Fear seeped into their ranks, their movements more cautious, their formations tighter. Carter and his team exploited it mercilessly, striking and vanishing, turning the Dominion's own technological arrogance against them. The battlefield belonged to those who could adapt, and the Zeldar, for all their advancements, were learning that evolution came at a cost. Days later, a new counter-sniper division arrived. Heavily armored units equipped with Zeldar precision rail weapons took positions in elevated nests, scanning for human marksmen. They weren't just here to defend. They were here to hunt. Carter and his team didn't run. They adjusted. They dismantled their long-range optics, relying instead on old-school spotter tactics. Human eyes against alien technology. No digital interference. No electronic emissions. Just instinct, patience, and a lifetime of experience. The first Zeldar sniper fell, without ever seeing the shot coming. The second panicked, firing wildly into the distance, revealing his position before Mitchell silenced him with a suppressed round. The others hesitated, their confidence cracking under the realization that human snipers weren't machines following predictable logic. A final shot rang out, and the last Zeldar sharpshooter slumped forward, his rail rifle slipping from lifeless fingers. Carter exhaled, scanning the battlefield. The Dominion had escalated, but escalation meant nothing if you didn't understand the enemy you were fighting. Mitchell slung his rifle over his shoulder. What's next? Carter studied the retreating figures in the distance. The Zeldar were regrouping again, adapting once more. He smirked. They'll figure something out. So will we. They vanished into the terrain, leaving the enemy scrambling for answers they'd never find. The Zeldar refused to accept uncertainty. Their species had dominated war for centuries through calculation and control, bending every battle to their will through superior technology and flawless logistics. But now, something beyond their understanding had taken root in their ranks. Fear. A human sniper who could not be predicted. A hunter who ignored their defenses as if they didn't exist. The Dominion's high command had given one order: eliminate Eagle Eye at all costs. Carter knew they were closing in. The shifts in enemy behavior told him everything. The Zeldar were no longer reacting blindly. They were setting traps, crafting a battlefield designed to funnel his team into vulnerable positions. The forward bases had become ghost towns, abandoned structures laced with motion-activated sentry drones. Even the patrols moved differently, deliberate, methodical, like bait meant to lure him into action. The game had changed. Mitchell crouched beside him, watching through his binoculars. They're waiting for us. Carter adjusted his scope. Below, a group of Zeldar soldiers patrolled an open valley, their body language stiff with forced routine. They were daring him to take the shot, hoping he'd reveal his location. He didn't bite. Instead, he shifted focus to the ridgeline beyond them, where a set of concealed thermal signatures pulsed faintly against the rock face. Snipers. Zeldar sharpshooters weren't known for patience, but these ones had been drilled to match human persistence. They wanted a clean kill. Reed let out a low whistle. They're learning. I almost respect it. Carter exhaled, considering their next move. The Zeldar had the advantage of numbers and firepower. His team had experience, instinct, and a refusal to play by the enemy's rules. That was their edge. Instead of engaging, they pulled back, vanishing into the crags before the aliens could detect their presence. The hunt had shifted, but Carter wasn't the prey. He was the storm rolling in unnoticed. Hours passed before they reached their fallback position, an abandoned supply depot buried within a cavern system beneath the valley. It was a relic from the first wave of the war, a place humanity had lost but never forgotten. Inside, the remains of old equipment lay scattered across the floor, rusted ration cans and spent shell casings, a reminder of the soldiers who had once fought here. It wasn't much, but it would serve. Mitchell set up the recon gear, tapping into passive sensors buried in the rock. They're not taking chances. We've got inbound aerial scans and at least one high-frequency jammer sweeping for electronic signals. Reed checked his rifle, muttering under his breath. They want to fight. Let's give him one. Carter studied the map, tracing the Zeldar movements. They weren't just trying to find them. They were trying to isolate them. If they engaged now, they'd be forced into a prolonged battle against overwhelming force. And that wasn't how they won. They needed to dictate the terms. A plan formed in his mind, built not on brute force, but on leverage. The Zeldar relied on their advanced tracking systems to close the noose. But those same systems were their weakness. Carter turned to Mitchell. How fast can you rig an interference burst? Mitchell frowned. Depends. What are you thinking? Carter knelt, drawing a rough schematic in the dirt. We feed them false readings. Make them think they've pinned us down. Give them something too tempting to ignore. When they commit, we take them apart from the flanks. Reed grinned. A bait and bleed? Now you're speaking my language. Mitchell got to work, repurposing the abandoned tech into a crude but effective signal disruptor. It wouldn't last long, but it didn't have to. The moment it went active, the Zeldar command network would believe they'd cornered their target. Carter and his team would be long gone by then, watching from the high ground as the aliens walked straight into a killing field. The trap was set within the hour. As expected, the Zeldar reacted with mechanical precision. Their forces closed in on the depot, deploying combat walkers and shielded assault units. They believed they had Carter locked in a desperate stand. They believed their sensors were infallible. They were wrong. Carter positioned himself on the ridgeline, rifle steady as the first wave of Zeldar breached the depot's outer defenses. Their formation was tight, disciplined, but they had no idea they were walking into an empty tomb. The moment the lead officer signaled an all-clear, Carter took his shot. The high-ranking alien crumpled mid-step, its body slamming into the dirt before its troops even realized what had happened. Reed opened fire next, his rounds punching through exoskeletal armor with ruthless precision. Mitchell handled the support angles, ensuring no stragglers had the chance to regroup. The Zeldar fell apart under the assault, their ranks breaking as panic set in. This wasn't the battle they had prepared for. This was a massacre. Carter didn't stop. He moved with practiced efficiency, picking off enemy commanders one by one. Each shot was more than a kill. It was a message. The Dominion's finest couldn't outmatch a human with a rifle and a plan. They couldn't quantify instinct. They couldn't counter adaptability. The last of the Zeldar forces attempted to retreat, but the battle had already been lost. Carter and his team faded back into the landscape, leaving nothing but bodies and unanswered questions in their wake. The Dominion would rethink their approach after this. They had no choice. Mitchell wiped sweat from his brow. We just pissed off a lot of important aliens. Reed chuckled. Good. Let him send more. Carter scanned the horizon, his expression unreadable. The war wasn't over. If anything, it was only just beginning. The Zeldar had been given every advantage, every opportunity to prove their superiority. And yet, they bled all the same. That was the real lesson. No matter how advanced the enemy, no matter how calculated their approach, they would never outmatch the one thing humanity had perfected: war. The Zeldar had never experienced humiliation before. Their dominion over war had been absolute, their calculations infallible. But now, reports were filtering through their command network, fragmented, panicked, filled with gaps their analysts couldn't explain. A lone human sniper and his team had undone months of strategic preparation. Entire battalions had been misled, picked apart, and left scattered across the battlefield like discarded chaff. It wasn't just a loss. It was a dissection. Their most advanced systems had failed to predict his movements. Their best warriors had fallen without even glimpsing their executioner. The Zeldar High Command didn't just want him dead. They wanted a statement. Carter knew they would escalate. That was the enemy's nature. They believed in dominance through overwhelming force, in suffocating opposition with sheer inevitability. But they still didn't understand the war they were in. They thought this was a game of numbers, of superior firepower and cold logic. They thought the human way of war could be quantified, predicted. They were wrong. A transmission came through the secure channel, encoded and barely traceable. It was from command, but the message was brief: evacuate. The Zeldar were bringing down the full weight of their orbital arsenal, scouring the entire sector with precision bombardments. They weren't just targeting Carter. They were wiping the entire theater clean, sacrificing their own forces in the process. It was an admission of failure wrapped in destruction. Carter had forced their hand. Reed scowled as he read the data feed. They're burning everything down just to kill us. Mitchell exhaled, shaking his head. They don't care. We made them bleed, and now they want to erase the whole damn battlefield. Carter considered their options. Escape wasn't an option, not in the conventional sense. The skies were locked down, patrols sweeping for any human signatures. They could run, but they wouldn't get far before orbital fire turned the terrain to molten glass. The only way out was through. They had to break the Zeldar's command net, dismantle their ability to call down the bombardments before they could fire. And that meant striking at the source, their forward operations hub. It was a suicide mission by any metric. The Zeldar had reinforced their base with everything they had left. Shields, automated defenses, drone swarms. But Carter wasn't looking for a straight fight. He wasn't looking to survive. He was looking to win. They moved under cover of darkness, slipping past sentries that were too focused on the wrong locations. The Zeldar were still hunting ghosts, expecting a sniper in the hills, when the real threat was already inside their perimeter. Carter's team breached the outer defenses with surgical precision, eliminating key personnel before alarms could even register. The Zeldar command hub was a fortress, but its strength was also its weakness. It was built to repel an army, not ghosts. Inside, the enemy command structure was in chaos. Their officers were arguing, their battle projections scrambling to keep up with the changing variables. Carter didn't give them time to recover. They moved fast, cutting through the defenders with brutal efficiency. Each shot was precise, not just killing but dismantling the Zeldar's ability to react. Then came the final blow. Mitchell reached the core terminal, a pulsating hub of alien technology directly linked to the orbital fleet. With a few keystrokes and a carefully planted data spike, he turned their own network against them. The bombardment orders were scrambled, redirected to empty coordinates. The fleet, unable to verify their targets, hesitated. In war, hesitation was fatal. Carter and his team withdrew as the Zeldar forces scrambled to regain control, their command structure in disarray. By the time the enemy realized what had happened, it was too late. The humans had vanished. The bombardment never came. The battlefield remained scarred but standing, a testament to the fact that the Zeldar had failed. Back at the rendezvous point, Carter adjusted his rifle, watching the distant flashes of confused skirmishes between Zeldar units struggling to re-establish order. He knew this war wasn't over. But today, they had proven something the enemy couldn't ignore. They had thought of humanity as a problem to be solved. But some problems couldn't be solved. Some problems just killed you.